Hi everyone, I'm Claire King from ImproveMe, and today I'm really pleased to be speaking with my co-founder and the original creator of the ImproveMe concept, Brent Lehmann. Hi Brent.
Hi Claire. Thanks for everyone who's taken a bit of an interest in ImproveMe and for watching today.
Brent, to give a little context to our discussion, could you tell our viewers a little bit about your background as a mentor to professional athletes?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. It all started several years ago now, and very, very unexpectedly, where I was contacted by an AFL club who asked me to step in and support one of their players who had just been recently diagnosed with a chronic medical condition. It just so happened that that same chronic medical condition is something that I've been living with since the age of 19. So there was a lot of similarities from a history in sport into helping him out. As they say, sometimes a lot of things happen by default as opposed to by design. And the level of interest in the process that we went through really ballooned from there and ultimately led to where we are today with ImproveMe.
And so thinking back to when we started ImproveMe, that really came about when the demand on your time to mentor professional athletes in a one-to-one capacity in their preparation for life after sport just became too big for you alone to handle, didn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, there was a true goal at the time to try and help as many people as I possibly could who went out of their way to seek that support. What I quickly found was the conversations and discussions that we were going through at that time were quite consistent from a position of where you start. And the idea then turned into a way that can we use technology to allow the preliminary nature of that conversation to kick off and support many, many athletes and people of other occupations and backgrounds as possible.
That that consistency point is really interesting. So for the users, ImproveMe users that are watching, and for other viewers, I'd really like to go through that process, that consistent process that you take professional athletes through on a one-to-one basis when you plan what their career path might look like when their sporting career comes to an end, whether that's tomorrow or whether that's in many years' time, because I think that'll be really valuable for those watching, because those thought processes can really apply to anyone looking to change their career path or further their career, obviously not just to athletes. So
absolutely, there's remarkable similarities between professional athletes and non-athletes, and it's getting closer and closer time.
And so what is the starting point of that discussion that you have with athletes when you first sit down with them to kick off that conversation?
If I can take it back a step, with an athlete, it's a little bit different to anyone who's working in employment as they sit here today or attending university with a clear pathway as to what they're doing and how they're doing it. All athletes have a defined period of time in their chosen sport. Statistically, the vast majority of athletes will be well retired by the age of 35, meaning that they've got another 30 years of their working life to start to understand, learn about and appreciate so that they can continue to have a fulfilling life beyond sport itself. So for us, we start from a foundation of having athletes understand their core strengths. We spend a lot of time working through a competency assessment or an evaluation process, because once we give them the confidence to understand their strengths, every other step that forms part of ImproveMe follows from that point, from that foundation that we set at that point in time.
And once they know what those strengths are, what do you talk to them about in terms of developing those even further and the importance of knowing your strengths?
Yeah, we try and start small. In a lot of cases, this can be a big step for some because they've been so ingrained in a professional athletic environment that not a lot of attention has turned to what they might need to be doing away from the sport itself now in preparation for life after the game at a future point in time. So by starting small, once an athlete goes through the ImproveMe assessment and they learn all about what their strengths are, The program that we run maps a number of opportunities against those strengths to help build confidence in that topic. Now, they could be things as simple as a podcast to listen to. It could be a TED Talk to watch. It could be a YouTube channel to subscribe to. Or it could be a short course program, because we have many short courses from a number of providers, that the vast majority of which are available for free through the platform. So whether it's an investment of 10 minutes to maybe 2 hours of their time, there's ways that we can actually start to get them to understand the importance of their strengths and how valuable they are in a transferable sense for what they might want to do beyond the game.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because people often will say, what about weaknesses? And I think it's obviously important for people to, or valuable for people to have an understanding of their strengths and their weaknesses, but it will be their strengths that will drive them forward in their, propel them forward in their career and lead them to points of greatness.
That's absolutely correct. Anyone who's been involved in a professional sporting environment will know that with the microscopic view that's taken of performance, that there's many people who are happy to point out where your weaknesses are and where your improvement is required. But if we can start to flick the switch and go the other way to get people to understand that there's a future that they can attack with a bit of confidence by knowing what their strengths are, by giving them an ability to understand what those transferable skills are, in some respects, we can help remove any fear of failure that they might have outside of the sport itself. And that can provide a really strong platform for the opportunities that can develop from there.
Great. And so once an athlete has undertaken that testing and they have a good understanding of their key strengths, or their competencies as we call them, how do you go about working through the process with them of applying that knowledge to help them think about what their future career options might actually be?
That's a very good question, Claire. Part of the program, once anyone has been through it, will quickly learn that once your strengths are identified, given access to a personal development portal. Now, that portal allocates the careers that are directly matched to what those strengths are. So it's an opportunity to take the time to actually have a look through those, get a bit of an understanding about them. There's a number of links on the platform where you can go and learn more about that particular industry. But from a conversational perspective, the number one thing that we suggest is that they look at the careers that overlap both strengths, because there's some clear opportunity there that's starting to shine through. In a one-on-one conversation, I'll typically ask about their educational background as well. What subjects at school were they good at, but also what were they actually comfortable doing, happy doing, and motivated to keep doing, that might not have been a sport-related subject.
Yeah, okay.
Once we do that, the opportunities then can unfold in terms of setting up opportunities to meet people, explore different career pathways. And what we want to do is sometimes create a bit of a list of maybe 10 or 12 opportunities. Now, even if an athlete is starting to look at them and they'll say, maybe 8 or 9 of those are really not for me, but 2 or 3 are, those 8 or 9 that we've put a line through to say are not really for me are just as important as the ones that we've identified as the top 2 or 3 that we need to explore and pursue a bit further.
So spending time crossing things off the list to narrow down where it is that you might really have an interest is time well spent, basically.
Yes, absolutely it is, yeah.
And then what are the next aspects of preparing for a potential career that you discussed with them once they kind of have that list and they know what path they might want to go down?
Most of it reverts back to that famous saying, or the 5 Ps, which we'll call it. We'll leave the 6th out, but we'll just call it planning and preparation that prevents poor performance. And a lot of it is, how are we going to prepare ourselves for that right opportunity when that right moment arises? If I go right back to the start of when a competency assessment is undertaken, Everyone has the opportunity to have a peer assessment completed as well, and there is an option to have up to 5 peers conduct an assessment. We strongly recommend that take place, and that's whether it's from an existing coach, a past coach, a mentor, or someone who knows you very well, because you can identify blind spots, and those blind spots might be weaknesses that you might not be aware of, but more importantly, they might be strengths and skills that you might not be aware of as well, that are very transferable into a future beyond the game or beyond the sport itself. Some of the other basic things that we like to get people underway with is how to use a social media platform like LinkedIn. In the vast majority of cases, many athletes are not active in an environment like that. So how to get them started and how to position a page where they can use it as a bit of a basis or a foundation for networking, which we'll touch on later, I'm sure. How do you prepare an up-to-date resume, delivering the right information that people are looking for, as opposed to basic information? And how do you access them?
I was just going to say there's a real skill to that as well.
There really is, and how do you access a mentor? And that mentor might be within the industry that you're looking at. It might be someone that you've known for a while who's worked across a variety of industries, or it just could be someone who you've trusted for a long period of time, or a combination of all of those. So we step everyone through that process, and that helps the preparation phase. One of the topics that frustrates me a lot, and I hear this many, many times, is I had an opportunity to catch up for a coffee with someone, but it was just a coffee catch up and it didn't really lead anywhere. What we want to try and educate a lot of these athletes about is go into that coffee catch up prepared. Have an understanding about what your strengths are, because you've been through a process and you've understood it and learned more about yourself through that process. Learn what it is that you really want to think about from an opportunistic perspective in terms of moving forward, and what types of things you're really looking for from an experience perspective as well. So when you go into a conversation for a coffee catch-up, you can talk about sport, you can talk about the game, you can talk about whatever element of participation you want to get involved in, but you can also come away from that knowing that you've answered a number of key questions and have walked away from it with something of great value to you. Yeah,
absolutely. And interestingly, that piece around identifying a mentor or one or more mentors, which is definitely an option. So many people that you read about who talk about success and how their success came about, they always mention having one or more mentors that they have had to help them on their career. So can't stress that one enough in terms of how important that one is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Claire. I still have 2, great mentors that I trust explicitly, that I still talk with on a very regular basis. So it doesn't matter what stage of your career you're at. Everyone can benefit from accessing a trusted mentor. Yeah,
definitely. And just back to the very first thing you said there around peer assessments and using that to understand your blind spots. I think that's really important, because often we see people can really downplay their skills and their strengths, and it can be the input from someone else that makes them realize, hey, I am actually really good at something. I am actually really good at that. So I think just to stress that peer assessment part is very important as well.
And interestingly, Claire, that's a great point, because when we look at all of the assessments that have been undertaken through the ImproveMe program to date, those that have chosen to have peer assessments undertaken, the peer will typically rate the individual participant higher than themselves. So you're right, a lot of people will naturally mark themselves a little bit harder than what other people might see them, and that alone is quite an enlightening experience.
Yeah, really valuable information, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so what about networking activities? I think you mentioned networking before. What advice do you give to athletes about making them the most of their networks?
Yeah, it's interesting that how do I go about networking is probably the single most common question that we get asked, because there's a number of ideas and there's always a bit of a destination that people have got in mind. But it's actually how do we get from where we are today to that destination that we want to get to.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, it starts with networking. So if we go back to that original topic we spoke about in terms of a LinkedIn profile, we encourage people to get a bit more active on LinkedIn. It's a safe environment. It's a way that people can reach out and connect with others. It's a very, very easy opportunity for an opportunity to catch up for a telephone call, a coffee, an introduction via a second connection or a third connection. It's quite a safe and easy way to learn the art of networking. But one thing we always try and reinforce is when the opportunity arises to meet somebody from a networking perspective, always go into it with the mindset that there has to be a mutual outcome here. Don't just go and approach somebody and ask what they can do for you. Go with the perspective of you may be able to help them in some way, shape or form as well. And true respected networks are built on the back of that mutual outcome and mutual benefit.
So important, isn't it? And there might be that mutual benefit might be something that happens straight away, or it might be something that happens down the track. So it's just around laying the groundwork for that as well, and having that as a potential for long-term value that you can add to each other.
It is. The other really important one too is a lot of sporting clubs have very powerful support networks that sit behind them, whether it be the board of the sporting organisation itself or the governing body, coterie groups, volunteer groups that all sit behind and support that sport. There's a lot of accessible people who are only too willing to give their time and their guidance to athletes who are participating in the sport. So if we can encourage them to get started and learn some of the basics of networking through a bit of a soft introduction through LinkedIn or other similar platforms, that can help pave the way for a lot more confidence to then start talking to people at a more strategic level who may be able to really help them out and have a vested interest in their outcome.
Yeah, okay. And it's interesting, regardless of if someone is a high-performing athlete that competes or plays a sport in front of tens of thousands of people, or whether they're an everyday person on the street, people's fear of the idea of networking can be exactly the same. It can make people, like myself, break into a cold sweat. But as you said, LinkedIn is a really kind of safe place to start with that. And that's why we put together one of our fact sheets is around 12 ways on LinkedIn that you can add value to your network as a bit of an easy introduction to it. Yeah,
which, as we know, has been very well received since it was released.
Yeah, that's right. So networking doesn't have to be scary. And then are there other, outside of networking, are there other activities that you suggest in terms of helping people or helping athletes to prepare or to increase their future opportunities that might come about for them?
Yeah, some of it hangs off the back of networking. But in a broader sense, we look at things like if it's an industry or occupation that you like and you know somebody in that industry, maybe make an offer to see if you can shadow someone for a day or two, learn a little bit more about that industry, because you may go in with a preconceived idea, but it might be totally different once you experience it firsthand.
Yeah, okay.
We encourage people to look for volunteering opportunities. If it's in a particular field that's relevant to what they want to do. Maybe that's an opportunity to learn more, create new connections, and understand at a much broader level what that industry segment does. And then there's also work experience and internships, and they become a little bit more detailed because they typically require some form of application process, resume development. But there's a number of organisations that are connected to ImproveMe, well in excess of 100, where we have the ability to link people to different organisations once they've done the background work through ImproveMe, that they can then set up opportunities to potentially explore work experience internships, or potentially beyond that, full-time employment.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it, when you consider something like just asking someone, could you shadow them for a day in their job to get a bit of a taste of what it's like, regardless of if it's a professional athlete asking that, or just someone asking someone that they've met at a barbecue that, might be in the industry they would want to be in. I would be astounded if anyone would say, no, sorry, but I'm not willing to do that for you. I think people would be very open to letting others have those kind of opportunities and get the insight that would provide.
Yeah, most people that you talk to, when you ask them that very question, they take it very, very well, because it's almost you saying, I'm really interested in what you do, and I'm really interested in the industry and how you've built a business or what that business does. So the people who you're reaching out to naturally get a little bit excited that someone has got genuine interest in what they do, how they do it, and the industry in which they participate.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. So looking through a sporting lens, professional athletes can be considered some of the most motivated people on the planet. But what about away from the field when they're looking at career development, particularly where they might be thinking, well, my sporting career is not going to come to an end for many years to come. What advice do you give to them around, staying motivated in their career development preparation?
There's probably two aspects to that question, Claire. One of them is, like anything in life, the better prepared you are and the more work that you've done before the event takes place, the better prepared that you will be to achieve success in the long run. So our message is, this approach is not something that you start a year before retirement. This is something that you embrace from the moment that you enter the professional sporting environment, because you have the ability to generate greater balance in your life. And that balance between professional sport and the stresses, the rigour and the demand of that performing in a public environment can be offset by taking your mind to a different place and having something away from the sport itself, that you're not only experiencing a better mental health balance, but you're also preparing for your future beyond the sport itself as well.
Yeah.
The other really interesting aspect that we've understood for the 10 years that we've been doing this now is many athletes carry a cloud of uncertainty around the future. It may be that they see teammates who suffer season or career-ending injuries, or they may be approaching the end of a current contract period and unsure about how that negotiation is going to go. All of a sudden, a lot of these athletes, they enter the sporting field encumbered with a bit of stress, and it prevents them from delivering the best person that they can be on a performance basis. So one of the things that we found is those that have far better balance by looking at their commitment to the sporting environment, which we certainly don't want to compromise, but also having another commitment away from the game and removing that cloud of uncertainty, we can actually almost create a bit of a comfort zone or a calm space or a calm environment. And those guys and girls that approach it in that manner end up improving their on-field performance. And we've yet to come across an athlete who hasn't improved when they've embraced a program such as this.
Seems kind of counterintuitive to spend time doing something else, and as a result your on-field performance might improve. But that is what we've seen, which is really interesting.
And when you think about it, from a non-athlete perspective, for anyone who's a participant in the general workforce, time and time again we're reminded about the right work-life balance that we should be pursuing. Yeah. It's no different in an athletic environment. Work-life balance is incredibly important for everybody, whether you're an athlete or whether you're not an athlete.
And so, Brent, what's the outcome? What's the difference you see between athletes who follow all those steps and ensure that they're prepared for a career in their life after sport compared to athletes that just don't do that preparation over the course of their career? And also, how does that, or how can that apply to people from other walks of life?
So to the first part of that question, I really go back to the part of the conversation we were just having in terms of athletes typically improve their performance in their chosen sporting field with that balance because they're unencumbered by any negative thought or concerns that they may have about what's happening in their professional life away from the sport itself. That's one of the big advantages that we see. It also provides an incredibly smooth transition. Many of them go from probably the highest wages that they'll be earning in their career to something a bit less than that. And that transition and how you manage that transition mentally is really, really important. So the better prepared that you can be for that, the smoother the transition, and ultimately what we will see is a number of these athletes, when they move into those chosen careers, because of the transferable skills that they've developed over that period of time, their non-sport career will actually accelerate at a rapid rate. And they will bypass a lot of other peers that may already be established in that industry. So from a general workforce perspective, there's a lot of articles that have been published recently and a lot of content being shared around the future of work and some of the challenges that organisations and employees will face, whether it be emerging technology that will displace a number of people from their current roles, the importance to re-educate and reskill to take on different roles, or in preparation for a situation where you don't like your job. And surprisingly, there was a video that we both saw recently which said that 87% of people globally are disengaged with the role they currently perform in the workforce, which is just a staggering amount.
Absolutely.
How do we overcome that, and how do we get people to be far more happier and engaged about what they do and how they do it? For us, it's all about understanding what their strengths are and how can we develop those strengths further to put them in a place where their skills are not only rewarded, but they're recognised and they're motivating themselves around doing work that they want to do because they know they're good at it and they know they can get better at it. It's really an untapped resource for a lot of people and a lot of organisations to make sure that they've got a workforce that are all playing to their strengths.
Certainly a good feeling to come home from work at the end of the day and feel like you've used your strengths and that you've really, because of that, you've really achieved.
Yes, we all aspire to get to that point in time, don't we?
Yeah, we definitely do. There's just 87% who need to work on that a little bit more.
That's right. Lucky we're part of the 13%, Claire.
Of course. Well, we're very passionate about this topic and the work that we do with ImproveMe, so we're lucky in that regard. Brent, you've shared such a wealth of information with our audience today, which I'm sure they'll go away and kind of digest for quite some time. Any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Only to say that everybody needs to get started at some point in time. The best piece of advice that we can share is we can all talk about this topic over and over again, but where we start to make a difference is if we actually get started. And it doesn't take much. It's just small steps, and it's amazing how much those small steps can turn into big steps and can turn into something quite fulfilling that we're all aspiring to get to at some point in time. So my advice is listen to people, talk to people, have meaningful conversations with people, and invest the time to learn about yourself. Understand what your strengths are, understand how transferable they are, and start to build a plan for what you think will be the most fulfilling future that you can have.
And I think also not to underestimate how willing other people will be to help you as well. think that's
very,
really
very,
important.
very underestimated or understated point.
Yeah.
People fear reaching out to have a conversation with others, whereas in fact, very, very rarely will you find someone who's not interested in putting their hand up to help you. Whether you're an athlete or whether you're not an athlete is irrelevant. People, by and large, are happy to help other people.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Brent. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure all of our viewers appreciate it too.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks for your time, and thanks everybody who's taken the time to listen and watch.